I'd like to welcome everyone, and I do mean everyone. Well, if we're
The United States Senate Committee on Finance on Monday held a hearing to examine the latest GOP plan to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. The Graham-Cassidy-Heller-Johnson proposal got a raucous reception before the proceeding got underway.
For today, let me just say this. If the hearing is going to devolve into a sideshow or a forum simply for putting partisan points on the board, there's absolutely no reason for us to be here. I won't hesitate to adjourn the hearing if it gets to that point. It hasn't gotten there yet, but it's close. I'm saying this for the benefit of my colleagues on the committee and everyone in the audience. Let's have a civil discussion.
This Trump care bill is a health care lemon, a disaster in the making. The fact that it's the last Republican repeal bill standing doesn't make it okay. It's going to be a nightmare for tens of millions of Americans. And it makes a mockery of the president's promise of better insurance for everybody at lower costs.
On the very first witness panel, two senators, Republican senator from South Carolina and co-author of the new health care plan, Lindsey Graham, and right beside him, Democratic senator from Hawaii and perhaps the face of the Obamacare repeal resistance, Mazie Hirono.
We are grateful to have such passionate and wonderful senators join us today to share their views. Senator Graham, will you please share with us your remarks, and then we'll go to Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first remark I would like to share with you is why I'm here. I'm here because Obamacare is a disaster in my state. It's not your job to take care of South Carolina, it is mine, and I intend to do that. Maybe we'll find a common way forward, I don't know, but I'm not going to be deterred.
But I intend to help.
Thank you.
Put it that way.
In 2014, there were 5 insurers offering plans to South Carolina customers under the exchange. Today, we're down to 1 with a 31% increase announced Friday. If you expect me to walk away from that, you're sadly mistaken. I don't know how it's working in your state, but in my state, it's a disaster. Why are we in finance? Because health care really does affect federal finances. Most of you know that by 2042, that the entire revenue stream will be consumed by Medicare and Medicaid spending unless somebody does something about it. There'll be no money for the military, the Department of Education, NIH, or anything else. So what do? I deal with 2 problems. Nationally, Obamacare premiums are going up 13% in the individual market. 45% of the counties in America are down to 1 choice, and 45 counties in this country have no choice under the plan you designed. The bottom line is I don't doubt your intention to help people. I do question whether or not it is working as intended. And you can question my motives, and quite frankly, I don't care, because I know why I'm here.
You're saying who designed it? It wasn't mine.
Well, I know, Mr. Chairman, it wasn't. So we got 2 problems. If somebody doesn't fix Obamacare soon, the majority of counties in this country are going to be down to 1 provider. It is collapsing as I speak. Medicaid. Medicaid is on an unsustainable path. By 2027, we're going to be spending more on Medicaid than the military. By 2042, Medicare and Medicaid combined take all the money that's going to be sent to Washington in taxes. And what do? In year 8 of the block grant, we give flexibility and control to the states over the Medicaid program like they haven't had before, but they have to spend it on the population in question. We begin to slow the growth down to make it more sustainable, but the flexibility we give will allow us to get better outcomes. Medicaid spending and Medicaid outcomes are not matched up to where anybody should want them to be. When it comes to Obamacare, if you don't find a way to stop the bleeding, then it's going to basically collapse before our eyes. And here's what we do. I'm getting a lot of pushback from my Republican colleagues because I leave the taxes in place. Here's the idea of Graham-Cassidy-Heller-Johnson. We repeal the individual mandate and the employer mandate, but you can reimpose it in your state if you like. If you want to go to single-payer health care, you can do it in Oregon, but you're not going to drag me with you. So here's the deal. We leave the taxes in place. It's $1.2 trillion, and we block grant it out to the states in a formula that I think is fair. Under Obamacare, between 20 and 26, 4 states get 35.4% of the money. They're Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, and California, and they're 22% of the population. Good deal for them, not so much for the rest of us. Under this block grant, they get 29%, not 35%, still more than the population. What have I learned? Hawaii is a very expensive place to provide Medicaid. It's a very expensive place to provide health care. It's just a very expensive place to live. Alaska has 750,000 people, 2.5 times the size of Texas. Under this bill, we look at you. Rather than some bureaucrat in Washington who has all the money and the power, we're going to turn it back to you, your state legislature, and your governor. And I asked the following question at a lunch not long ago. How many of you know your state house member? Almost everybody raised their hands. How many of you know the governor of South Carolina? Everybody raised their hand. I asked the question, how many of you know who's in charge of Obamacare in South Carolina? Nobody raised their hand. And that is the problem. We're going to send this money back to the states. You can't spend it on roads and bridges. You got to spend it on health care. You're going to have flexibility, but you're also going to have accountability. And for the first time in health care, somebody's going to listen to you. Because if you don't like the health care you got, you can complain to somebody you vote for. The model you've created is never going to work. As to the opposition to this bill, to the ranking member, every major insurance company opposes our bill. Why? Because we take hundreds of billions of dollars away from them that we're going to them from the federal government and give it to the states. Guess what? They don't like that. If I were a major insurance company, I'd hate my bill because I take money and power away from you and I give it to the states. Washington is wired when it comes to health care. Everybody opposing this bill is a big winner of Obamacare, and my goal is to get the money and power out of Washington closer to where people live so they'll have a voice about the most important thing in their life. I don't need a lecture from anybody about health care, but what you have created is not working. It's time to try something new, and I believe with all my heart and soul, Mr. Chairman, that if we took the money and power out of Washington, we got it closer to the patient, we put it in the hands of somebody you would have a relationship with, and you could actually vote for if you don't like the product, we're going to get a better outcome. And this is not the last chance. This is the best chance. And to my friends to the left, I will do everything I can to stop and put a stake in the heart of single-payer health care. You don't like Obamacare. You don't think it's big government enough. I'm here to stop you. You care as much as I do about health care, but going beyond Obamacare is a nightmare for this country. It will ruin health care and bankrupt the American people. And this is a debate worth having. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Well, thank you, Senator Graham. Senator Hirono will please proceed with your statement now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Wyden and all of the members of the committee. Thank you for inviting me to testify. When I was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer about 5 months ago, 2 things. The first was the diagnosis came as a total shock to me. It came about incidental to a physical checkup that involved an entirely different procedure that I was facing. This is how a lot of people learn about a serious illness or condition. Out of the blue, bang. They can't plan for it. Second, I received letters, cards, and notes when people found out. I was touched by the hands reaching out to me, the show of compassion, including from so many of my colleagues, including members of this committee on both sides of the aisle. Every day now, people come up to me at airports, grocery stores, restaurants, to tell me that they too are cancer survivors. There is a connection there. It is never a good time to have cancer, but what I am experiencing through my cancer is the care and concern expressed by total strangers. This is compassion. It helps me a lot. What we do as leaders affecting everyone's lives should reflect compassion. Sadly, that's not in this bill. In the greatest, richest country in the world, compassion for our fellow men and women should not be so elusive or indeed missing. After all the compassion and care that I received from my colleagues after I disclosed my diagnosis, the Graham-Cassidy proposal reflects neither care nor compassion for millions across the country. Healthcare is a right. It is a right. It is not a privilege reserved for those who can afford it. But Graham-Cassidy treats healthcare like a commodity that can be bought and sold. This is fundamentally wrong. Although nearly all of us will face a serious illness during our lifetimes, it's almost impossible to budget and plan for the costs associated with treating it. And once you're diagnosed, you can't just put off treatment because you can't afford it. Before the Affordable Care Act, catastrophic healthcare costs were the largest driver of personal bankruptcies in the country. And since the law went into effect, we've seen a huge reduction in personal bankruptcies. There is a causal relationship when people get health care. If you dig into the details and numbers, it's clear this bill is much worse than the bill we defeated in July. Under the thin veneer of states' rights and local control, the Graham-Cassidy bill imposes a radical overhaul on one-sixth of the American economy. According to the Brookings Institution, 32 million people will lose their health coverage under it. There's so much wrong with this bill that it's difficult to confine my remarks to only the short time I've been allowed to testify. Contrary to promises made by the bill's authors, this proposal undermines protections for the close to 600,000 people in Hawaii and 134 million people all across the country living with pre-existing conditions. This bill seriously undermines consumer protections that require coverage for pre-existing conditions and prohibit insurance companies from charging sick people more for care, which is exactly what they will do, believe me, if this bill passes. The process requires a pro forma explanation of how a state would maintain coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. But it's really a box that they just check off. There's nothing here that ensures the level of protection that the Affordable Care Act does. Sure, the federal government can deny a state's waiver application, but the very people who would be making this decision at the federal level are longtime opponents of the Affordable Care Act. Sadly, the American people cannot trust this administration to do the right thing regarding their health care. We don't have to look back far to see what the result would be if a state granted a waiver. Insurance companies could use age, health status, and other factors to determine what premiums to charge. They could set annual and lifetime limits on care and could refuse treatments because of how much they cost. Believe me, I have a complicated illness, and I would reach lifetime limits in practically a nanosecond. I intend to live a lot longer before that day comes. Under this bill, coverage might be available, but it would be prohibitively expensive and able to be taken away in someone's moment of greatest need. This bill dismantles Medicaid as we know it. The bill converts Medicaid into a block grant to states and cuts its funding by hundreds of billions of dollars by 2026. It punishes states like Hawaii that expanded Medicaid by cutting federal funding and redistributes it to those states that did not expand Medicaid, and therefore hundreds of thousands of people in those states don't even have the kind of coverage that Hawaii provided. For Hawaii, we're looking at around $4 billion in cuts and 91,000 fewer Hawaii residents having health care because of this bill. Because states would receive so much less money, they will no longer be able to provide quality, adequate care for as many people as possible. Instead, they will face the impossible task of choosing who should lose insurance and which services to cut. Even then, the most vulnerable members of our society, the elderly and the disabled, children, will not receive the care and services they need. Mr. Chairman, we are all one diagnosis away from a major illness. I certainly found that out. With so much uncertainty right now in our country, the one thing that people should be able to count on in the richest country in the world is getting the care they need when they need it. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege for those who can afford it. Healthcare is personal to every single one of us. I'd like to conclude with a call to action. This bill would be devastating for millions of people across the country facing dire health consequences. Millions of lives are at stake. Let's return to the bipartisan negotiations led by Senators Alexander and Murray to stabilize the health insurance marketplace. And this is something they are doing together in a bipartisan way. This is exactly how we should approach healthcare in our country. Focus on the people we are elected to serve. Focus on the people we are elected to serve. Show them the compassion that they are expecting from their leaders. They expect us to work together and come up with a bill that we can get behind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Senator Hirono. We appreciate your remarks. Thanks to both of you for sharing your remarks to the committee today. I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say that we are hopeful and praying, Senator Hirono, for your quick and total recovery from cancer. We do appreciate both of you for taking the time to be with us today. You are both welcome to stay for as long as you wish.